What happens when Hollywood's toughest guy meets morning television? The biggest personality, and things go completely off the rails. You're about to witness one of the most explosive celebrity interviews ever caught on live television. Make sure to subscribe and drop a comment below, because this story will leave you speechless. The Good Morning America studio buzzed with its usual pre-show energy as cameras rolled for what was supposed to be a routine promotional interview. Sylvester Stallone had arrived to discuss his latest project. But from the moment he settled into the guest chair across from Michael Strahan, there was an unmistakable tension in the air. "Sly, great to have you back on the show," Michael began with his trademark smile, shuffling through his notes. "So, let's talk about this new film. I have to say, some critics are calling it a desperate attempt to recapture past glory. How do you respond to that?" The question hit like a sledgehammer. Stallone's jaw tightened, his eyes narrowing as he processed what had just been said. The usual pleasantries had been completely bypassed. "Excuse me." Stallone's voice carried that familiar gravelly tone, but there was something sharper underneath. "Desperate? That's how you want to start this conversation. Michael, I'm just asking what everyone's thinking. Sly, you're 78 years old, still throwing punches on screen. Some people wonder if you know when to hang up the gloves." The live studio audience shifted uncomfortably. This wasn't the light-hearted banter they'd expected from a morning show appearance. Stallone leaned forward, his hands gripping the arms of his chair. "Let me tell you something about desperate, Michael. Desperate is asking questions like that because you think it makes good television. Desperate is trying to tear down someone who's been entertaining people longer than you've been alive." "Now hold on there, Sly." Michael's smile began to fade. "I'm just doing my job here. These are legitimate questions about your career choices." "Your job?" Stallone's voice rose slightly. "Your job is supposed to be having a conversation, not ambushing a guest who came here in good faith. I've been making movies since you were playing football, and I don't need some morning show host telling me about career choices." The tension was palpable now. Camera operators glanced nervously at their directors, unsure whether to keep rolling or cut to commercial. Michael straightened in his chair, clearly not expecting this level of pushback. "Listen, I respect everything you've accomplished, but I have to ask the tough questions. That's what journalism is about." "Journalism?" Stallone let out a harsh laugh. "Is that what we're calling this? Because from where I'm sitting, it sounds more like you're trying to make a name for yourself by taking shots at someone who's actually earned their place in this business." "I've earned my place too, Sly. I didn't just fall into this chair." "Really? Because it sure seems like you think controversy is the same thing as credibility. You want to talk about my age? Let's talk about experience. Let's talk about what it means to create characters that people still care about decades later." The audience was dead silent now, watching what was clearly becoming more than just a difficult interview. Michael's professional composure was beginning to crack as he realized this wasn't going according to his plan. "Look, I'm not trying to attack you personally. I'm asking questions that viewers want answered." "No, you're asking questions that you think will get you noticed. There's a difference, Michael. And if you can't see that, then maybe you're the one who needs to think about career choices." The words hung in the air like smoke after a gunshot. Michael's face flushed as he tried to maintain his media-trained smile, but his eyes showed he was genuinely rattled by Stallone's directness. "I think you're misunderstanding the situation here, Sly. Because from my perspective, I came here to talk about my work, and you decided to turn this into some kind of roast." "That's not misunderstanding, Michael. That's you making a choice about what kind of host you want to be." Michael Strahan's jaw clenched as he processed Stallone's words. The veteran host had conducted thousands of interviews, but this was spiraling into uncharted territory. He could feel the producers in the control room holding their breath, waiting to see how he would handle this unprecedented challenge to his authority on his own show. "You know what, Sly? I think you're being overly sensitive here. This is live television, and sometimes the questions get a little heated. That's just the nature of the business." Stallone's eyes flashed with something dangerous. "Overly sensitive? You just called my life's work desperate on national television, and now you want to lecture me about being sensitive? Michael, you clearly don't understand who you're dealing with." "I understand exactly who I'm dealing with," Michael shot back, his professional veneer finally cracking. "I'm dealing with someone who can't handle honest criticism. You've been coddled by Hollywood for so long that you forgot what real questions sound like." The accusation hit the studio like a lightning bolt. Even the camera operators exchanged shocked glances. This had crossed the line from uncomfortable interview into personal territory. Stallone slowly stood up from his chair, his imposing frame casting a shadow over the interview area. Coddled? You want to talk about being coddled? Michael, let me tell you about coddled. Coddled is sitting behind a desk asking other people about their struggles while you collect a paycheck for reading teleprompters. Sit down, Sly. You're making a scene. I'm making a scene? You started this when you decided to ambush me instead of doing your job professionally. And I'll stand if I want to stand. This is supposed to be a conversation between equals, not you talking down to me like I'm some washed-up has-been. Michael's face was red now, his carefully maintained composure completely gone. Nobody said you were washed up, but if the shoe fits. The words hung in the air for a moment before their full impact registered. The studio audience gasped audibly. Stallone took a step closer to Michael's desk, his voice dropping to that menacing whisper that had made Rocky Balboa and John Rambo household names. If the shoe fits? Did you really just say that to me? On live television. Stallone's hands were trembling. Whether from rage or restraint, it was impossible to tell. Michael, you just made the biggest mistake of your broadcasting career. Are you threatening me? Michael stood up. Now, too. Matching Stallone's energy, because if you are, we can end this interview right now. I'm not threatening anybody. I'm telling you that you've crossed a line that you can't uncross. You want to know about shoes fitting? Let's talk about how well the shoe of arrogance fits you. Let's talk about how you think sitting in this chair makes you untouchable. The tension in the studio was suffocating. Producers were frantically signaling from behind the cameras, but both men seemed oblivious to everything except their escalating confrontation. Michael's co-hosts, visible in the background, looked like deer caught in headlights. You know what your problem is, Sly? You can't handle the fact that your time is over. You're clinging to relevance. And when someone points that out, you lose your mind. Stallone laughed, but there was no humor in it. My time is over? Michael, I've been relevant longer than you've been alive. I was making movies that mattered when you were still figuring out which end of a football to hold. And I'll still be relevant long after people forget you ever existed. At least I know when to retire. Gracefully. Gracefully? Is that what you call this? Is this your idea of grace, Michael? Attacking a guest who came here to promote their work? Because if this is graceful, then I'd hate to see what you consider rude. Michael slammed his hand on the desk, the sound echoing through the studio. I'm not attacking you. I'm asking legitimate questions about your career, and you're acting like a child who can't handle criticism. A child? Stallone's voice rose to match Michael's volume. You want to see a child? A child is someone who thinks being handed a television show makes them important. A child is someone who confuses being loud with being right. A child is someone who doesn't know the difference between journalism and bullying. I'm not a bully, Sly. I'm a professional doing my job. Your job? Your job is to make guests feel comfortable and have meaningful conversations. Your job is to serve your audience by getting interesting stories out of people. Your job is not to tear people down to make yourself look bigger. The words cut deep, and Michael's face showed it. He built his post-football career on being the affable, approachable host who could get along with anyone. Being called a bully on his own show was clearly hitting him where it hurt most. You don't get to come on my show and tell me how to do my job. Your show? Stallone's eyebrows raised. This isn't your show, Michael. This show belongs to the viewers. They're the ones who decide whether you're worth watching. And right now, they're watching you destroy your own credibility because you thought you could take a cheap shot at someone who's been in this business longer than you've been breathing. Michael's hands were shaking now, his anger barely contained. You arrogant piece of. Michael caught himself mid-sentence, the near profanity hanging in the air like a loaded gun. The realization of what he almost said on live morning television hit him like a cold slap. His eyes darted to the cameras, then to the stunned faces of the crew. Then back to Stallone, who was watching him with something that looked almost like pity. Go ahead, Michael. Finish that thought, Stallone said quietly, his voice cutting through the stunned silence. Show America exactly what kind of man you really are when someone challenges you. The challenge hung between them like a dare. Michael's chest rose and fell with heavy breathing as he struggled to regain control. The professional broadcaster in him knew he was seconds away from career suicide. But his pride refused to back down from this confrontation. You don't know anything about me, Michael finally managed, his voice shaking with barely controlled rage. You don't know what I've been through, what I've accomplished, what I've built here. What you've built. Stallone shook his head slowly, genuine disappointment replacing the anger in his voice. Michael, what you've built is about to come crashing down because you couldn't handle having a simple conversation with a guest. What you've built is apparently so fragile that one person questioning your methods sends you into a meltdown on live television. The truth of those words seemed to hit Michael like a physical blow. His shoulders sagged slightly as the weight of what was happening began to sink in. Around the studio, crew members were frozen in place, unsure whether to intervene or continue rolling. The audience sat in stunned silence, witnessing what was clearly a career-defining moment for both men. "I didn't start this," Michael said, but his voice lacked the conviction it had carried moments before. "You're the one who got defensive over a simple question." "A simple question?" Stallone stepped closer to the desk, his presence commanding the entire space. "Michael, there was nothing simple about what you did. You looked me in the eye and called my work desperate. You questioned my relevance, my judgment, my right to continue doing what I love. That wasn't journalism. That was a personal attack, and we both know it." Michael's hands gripped the edge of his desk so tightly his knuckles were white. "I was doing my job. I was asking the questions the viewers want answered." "No. You were asking the questions that you thought would make you look important. There's a massive difference. And the fact that you can't see that tells me everything I need to know about what this show has become under your leadership." The word leadership seemed to hit Michael like a slap. His face cycled through emotions, confusion, anger, hurt, before settling on something that looked dangerously like desperation. "My leadership? I've turned this show around. The ratings are higher than they've ever been. I've interviewed presidents, celebrities, athletes. I've built something here that matters. Have you?" Stallone's question was so quiet it was almost a whisper, but it carried the weight of a sledgehammer. "Because from where I'm standing, what you've built is a platform for your ego. What you've built is a place where you can feel powerful by making other people feel small. Is that really what you're proud of, Michael?" The question seemed to break something inside Michael. His carefully constructed facade crumbled completely, and for a moment, the millions of viewers watching saw not the confident morning show host, but a man coming face to face with some uncomfortable truths about himself. "You don't understand. The pressure I'm under," Michael said, his voice barely audible. "Every day I have to prove myself. Every interview has to be perfect. Every question has to land just right, or the network executives start asking questions. You don't know what it's like to have your entire career dependent on ratings and social media buzz." Stallone's expression softened slightly, but his voice remained firm. "Michael, every single person in this business deals with pressure. The difference is how you handle it. You can either use that pressure to lift people up, to create something meaningful, or you can use it as an excuse to tear others down. Today, you chose to tear down." "I wasn't trying to tear you down," Michael protested. But the words sounded hollow even to him. "I was just trying to get good television." "Good television?" Stallone gestured around the studio. "Is this what you call good television?" Two grown men screaming at each other because one of them thought ambushing a guest was the way to create compelling content. "Michael, this isn't good television. This is a train wreck, and you're the engineer." The comparison stung visibly. Michael's face flushed again, but this time it seemed more from embarrassment than anger. Around them, the studio remained frozen in time, everyone waiting to see how this unprecedented moment would resolve. "I've worked too hard to get here to let someone like you destroy it," Michael said. But his voice carried no real conviction. It sounded more like he was trying to convince himself than making a genuine threat. "Someone like me?" Stallone raised an eyebrow. "What exactly does that mean, Michael? Someone who's been in this business for 50 years? Someone who's actually created things that people remember? Someone who understands the difference between entertainment and exploitation?" Michael opened his mouth to respond, then closed it again. The fight seemed to be draining out of him as the reality of his situation became clear. He was losing this battle, and losing it publicly, in front of millions of viewers who had tuned in expecting light entertainment and instead were witnessing his professional meltdown. "You know what the real tragedy is here, Michael?" Stallone continued, his voice taking on an almost paternal tone. "You're actually a talented guy. You've got charisma. You've got presence. You know how to connect with people. But somewhere along the way, you started believing that being provocative was the same thing as being good at your job." The words seemed to hit Michael harder than any of the anger that had come before. His eyes showed something that looked suspiciously like the beginning of tears, though he fought to maintain his composure on live television. "I just wanted to make good television," he repeated. But now it sounded more like a confession than a defense. I wanted to ask the questions that mattered. Then ask them with respect, Michael. Ask them with curiosity instead of malice. Ask them because you genuinely want to understand, not because you want to create conflict. That's the difference between a journalist and a shock jock. The silence stretched between them, heavy with the weight of everything that had been said. Michael's hands trembled as he tried to process not just Stallone's words, but the magnitude of what had just happened on live television. His career, his reputation, everything he'd worked for, was hanging in the balance of this moment. "I never wanted to be a shock jock," Michael whispered. And for the first time since the interview began, his voice carried genuine vulnerability instead of manufactured television emotion. "I wanted to be someone people respected. Then be that person, Michael. But you can't demand respect while you're busy disrespecting others. It doesn't work that way. Not in this business. Not in life." Michael looked around the studio, seeing the faces of his crew, his colleagues, the audience members who had come expecting a fun morning show, and instead witnessed this devastating exchange. The weight of their stares seemed to crush down on him. "How do I come back from this?" he asked. And the question seemed directed more at himself than at Stallone. "You start by taking responsibility for what just happened here. You stop making excuses, and you own up to the fact that you let your ego drive this train off the rails. And then you decide what kind of broadcaster you want to be going forward." The brutal honesty of Stallone's assessment hung in the air like smoke. Every word was true, and everyone in the studio knew it. Michael had been exposed not just as a host who'd lost control, but as someone who'd forgotten the basic principles of treating guests with dignity and respect. "This wasn't supposed to happen," Michael said, shaking his head. "This was supposed to be a simple promotional interview." "It could have been," Stallone replied. "All you had to do was treat me like a human being instead of a target. All you had to do was remember that behind every guest is a person, with feelings, with dignity, with a lifetime of experiences that deserve respect." The lesson was landing with devastating clarity. Michael's face showed the full realization of how completely he'd miscalculated, how thoroughly he'd destroyed what should have been a routine interview. The confident morning show host who'd started this segment had been replaced by a man grappling with the consequences of his own choices. The studio remained frozen in this moment of brutal honesty, the weight of Stallone's words settling over everyone present like a heavy blanket. Michael stood behind his desk, no longer the confident morning show host who had started this interview, but a man stripped bare of his professional facade and forced to confront the reality of what he had become. "You know what hurts the most about this whole thing?" Michael said, his voice so quiet the boom operators had to strain to pick it up. "I used to be better than this. When I first got into broadcasting, I genuinely cared about telling stories, about connecting with people. I don't know when that changed." Stallone's expression shifted. The anger that had fueled his devastating verbal assault gave way to something that looked almost like compassion. "It changes when you start caring more about the reaction than the connection, Michael. It changes when you start measuring success by how much noise you make instead of how much value you provide." "But the noise gets attention," Michael said, and there was something desperately sad in his voice. "The controversy gets clicks. The heated exchanges go viral. That's what the network wants. That's what the advertisers want. Sometimes it feels like being respectful is a luxury I can't afford." "That's where you're wrong," Stallone said, finally moving away from his aggressive stance and taking a step back toward his chair. "Respect isn't a luxury, Michael. It's the foundation of everything we do in this business. Without it, all the ratings and viral moments in the world won't save your soul." The word soul seemed to hit Michael like a physical blow. He sank slowly back into his chair, the fight completely drained out of him. Around the studio, crew members began to cautiously resume their positions, sensing that the volcanic eruption of anger was giving way to something more manageable, though no less profound. "I've been so focused on competing, on staying relevant, on beating the other morning shows that I forgot why I wanted to do this job in the first place," Michael admitted, his hands covering his face. "I forgot that there are real people on the other side of these interviews. Real people with real feelings," Stallone agreed, settling back into his guest chair, but maintaining the intensity of his gaze. "Real people who trust you enough to sit in that chair and share their stories with your audience. That's a sacred responsibility, Michael, and you've been treating it like a game." The word sacred hung in the air between them. In the context of morning television, with its light banter and celebrity gossip, it seemed almost absurd. But everyone present understood exactly what Stallone meant. There was something sacred about the trust between interviewer and guest, something that had been violated in those opening moments of aggressive questioning. "How do I fix this?" Michael asked, and the question carried the weight of a man genuinely seeking redemption. "How do I come back from completely destroying my credibility on live television?" "You start by acknowledging what happened here," Stallone said. "Not to me, not to your producers, but to the people watching at home. You tell them the truth about what they just witnessed. You own your mistakes without making excuses." Michael looked directly into the camera for the first time since the confrontation began. His face showed every emotion he'd been through in the past several minutes: the anger, the embarrassment, the dawning realization of his failures. "I need to apologize," he said, speaking directly to the lens. "Not just to Sylvester Stallone, but to everyone watching. What you just saw was completely unprofessional. I let my desire to create compelling television override my basic responsibility to treat guests with respect and dignity." The apology was raw, unscripted, and completely genuine. It was perhaps the most honest moment in the history of morning television. A host stripped of all pretense and forced to confront his own failures in front of millions of viewers. "I've been so caught up in ratings and viral moments that I forgot the most basic rule of broadcasting. Treat people like human beings, not like content to be exploited for entertainment value." Stallone nodded approvingly. "That's a start, Michael. But words are easy. The real test is what you do going forward. Do you learn from this moment, or do you go right back to the same destructive patterns next week?" "I want to learn," Michael said, turning back to face Stallone directly. "I want to be better than what you saw here today. You were right about everything you said. I have been using this platform to make myself feel important instead of using it to serve the audience." The transformation was remarkable. In the span of one interview, viewers had witnessed the complete breakdown and potential rebirth of a major television personality. Michael Strahan, the confident morning show host, had been replaced by someone humbler, more vulnerable, more human. "You know what's interesting about this whole situation?" Stallone said, his voice taking on a more reflective tone. 5 minutes ago, I was ready to walk off this set and never speak to you again. But watching you actually listen, actually absorb what I'm saying, that tells me there's hope for you yet." "Really?" Michael's voice carried a note of desperate hope. "Because I feel like I just committed career suicide on live television." "Maybe you committed career suicide for the old version of yourself," Stallone replied. "Maybe what we're seeing right now is the birth of someone better. Someone who remembers why they got into this business in the first place." The possibility of redemption seemed to energize Michael slightly. His shoulders straightened, and some of the crushing weight of embarrassment began to lift from his features. "I got into this business because I wanted to tell stories," Michael said. "I wanted to highlight people doing interesting things, making a difference, creating art. I wanted to be a bridge between celebrities and regular people, helping both sides understand each other better." "That's a noble goal," Stallone agreed. "And it's not too late to get back to that. But it means giving up the cheap shots, the gotcha questions, the manufactured controversy. It means caring more about the story than the spectacle." "Will people watch if I do that?" Michael asked, and the question revealed the core of his professional insecurity. Will they tune in for genuine conversation, or do they need the conflict to stay interested? "Michael, look at what's happening right now." Stallone gestured around the studio. "This is the most engaged I've ever seen a morning show audience. Not because we're screaming at each other, but because we're having a real conversation about something that matters. People are hungry for authenticity, for genuine human connection. Give them that, and they'll watch." The truth of those words was evident in the faces of everyone present. The studio audience, initially shocked by the confrontation, was now hanging on every word. The crew members, usually focused on technical details, were fully absorbed in the dialogue between these two men. "I think I understand now," Michael said slowly. "The controversy might get initial attention, but it's the substance that makes people stay. It's the respect and genuine curiosity that creates loyalty." "Exactly," Stallone confirmed. "Anyone can create drama, Michael. But it takes real skill to create connection. It takes real talent to make someone feel comfortable enough to share their authentic self with your audience." The lesson was landing with profound impact. Michael's entire approach to broadcasting was being deconstructed and rebuilt in real time, on live television, in front of millions of witnesses. "I want to start over," Michael said suddenly. "Right now, right here, I want to ask you the questions I should have asked from the beginning. The questions that come from genuine curiosity instead of a desire to create conflict. Stallone smiled for the first time since the interview began. "I'd like that, Michael. I'd like that very much." The transformation was complete. What had started as one of the most explosive confrontations in television history had evolved into something deeper. A masterclass in professional growth and human connection. Subscribe and comment below. What do you think was the most powerful moment in this incredible exchange between two giants of entertainment?